Hare Krishna, before beginning today's discussion on Srimad Bhagavatam, I'd like to ask for blessings of all the assembled devotees, Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis, especially senior devotees like Alanath Prabhu, Vasudeshta Prabhu, Chamari Mataji was also here. Srila Prabhupada's direct disciples. Srila Prabhupada writes in the Nectar of Devotion, paraphrasing Srila Rupa Goswami's description of pure consciousness of devotees, exalted devotees. He compares them to other hearts, to the shining of the moon. And he says that their hearts emanate or diffuse the moon-like rays of love for Krishna. And even those people who haven't yet measured up to the level of pure, spontaneous, or even regulated devotional service, being in the vicinity of such great devotees can feel reflection of their love in their own hearts. Many of you, I'm sure, and I also did have that experience, being in the vicinity of some great devotees. You feel like chanting, you feel like singing, you feel like serving. Somehow the darkness of material illusion becomes dissipated immediately, and being a devotee becomes very natural. I was fortunate to serve Srila Niranjana Maharaj on many occasions, for many years, traveling with him and translating for him and doing some other types of services. And I noticed that whenever I would enter the room of Maharaj, and those of you who know Niranjana Maharaj, he's very unassuming, very humble, down to earth, and very attentive and eager for association with devotees. But whenever you come into his room, you feel like somehow the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra spontaneously starts on its own, without any extraneous effort. And the same way, we're fortunate here and in other places of the world to still have Srila Prabhupada's direct disciples who have reflected that oceanic compassion of Srila Prabhupada, his mercy, his absorption, his attention, his strictness also. And we've been just discussing with some devotees recently that some of these Prabhupada's disciples reflect certain features of Prabhupada, certain qualities they amplify and make more present in their own preaching. But collectively they are the vehicles of Srila Prabhupada's presence in this world. So when we get a chance to be somehow close by and serve them and hear from them, we feel blessed as if by Srila Prabhupada's personal presence. So I'm asking for their blessings, Chamari Devi and Alanath Prabhu, Vasudeshta Prabhu, and other devotees, to say a few words on the Bhagavatam, with the hope that whatever I will say will be a reflection of what they would have said to glorify the Bhagavatam. Yeah, sorry, that's my highest level of volume. I cannot turn it up anymore. So we're reading Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 26, entitled Fundamental Principles of Material Nature, Text 6. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayat Nashta Prayesha Bhadrashu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavat Sutama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtiki Evam Parabhidyanina Evam Parabhidyanina Kartritvam Prakriti Puman Kartritvam Prakriti Puman Karmasu Kriyamaneshu Karmasu Kriyamaneshu Gunar Atmani Manyate Gunar Atmani Manyate manyate. Evam parabhidyanena kartritvam prakrite puman karmasu kriyamaneshu gunar atmani manyate. Vaishnavism. Word to word, evam, in this way, para, other, abhidhyanena, by identification, kartritvam, the performance of activities, prakritehe, of the material nature, puman, the living entity, karmasu kriyamaneshu, while activities are being performed, gunai, by the three modes, atmani, to himself, manyate, he considers. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. Because of his forgetfulness, the transcendental living entity accepts the influence of material energy as his field of activities, and thus actuated, he wrongly applies the activities to himself. I purport, the forgetful living entity can be compared to a man who is under the influence of disease and has become mad, or to a man haunted by ghosts, who acts without control and yet thinks himself to be in control. Under the influence of material nature, the conditioned soul becomes absorbed in material consciousness. In this consciousness, whatever is done under the influence of the material energy is accepted by the conditioned soul as self-actuated. Actually, the soul in his pure state of existence should be in Krishna consciousness. When a person is not acting in Krishna consciousness, he is understood to be acting in material consciousness. Consciousness cannot be killed, for the symptom of the living entity is consciousness. The material consciousness simply has to be purified. One becomes liberated by accepting Krishna or the Supreme Lord as master, and by changing the mode of consciousness from material consciousness to Krishna consciousness. I'll read the verse again. Evam parabhidyanena karchitvam prakritir puman karma sukriyamanishu gunair atmani manyate. Translation: because of his forgetfulness, the transcendental living entity accepts the influence of material energy as his field of activities, and thus actuated, he wrongly applies the activities to himself. Om Ajnana-timirandasya Gyananjana-shalakaya Chaksurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uttapada Kamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamshcha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutu Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vancha Kota Parubhascha Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamine Namaste Sarasvati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarine Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangumam Gayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam. So this chapter is titled Fundamental Principles of Material Nature. Bhagavatam is very practical, very pragmatic. It doesn't waste time on describing unnecessary features of the material nature. Material nature is just as Krishna, you could say, as inconceivable as Krishna himself. In the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, it is explained that even the great demigods, they're trying to figure out how the material nature works, but they cannot. They are baffled by its intricacies. Even the structure of this universe, again, which is quite bewildering for many devotees, Prabhupada predicted and was right that for many it will be a very difficult challenge to their faith in Krishna consciousness. The fifth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam describing a completely different universe to what we see through our own eyes or through the minds and eyes of scientists. And the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam explains that the great demigods, they're trying to figure out how this material nature works, and they cannot. Lord Brahma admits that we can only know what is allotted to us, the levers, the buttons, and the controls that are assigned to us to carry out our specific functions. But the whole contraption of this material nature is completely unknown to us. So Bhagavatam doesn't waste. In the fifth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, it's also explained that even if one spends his entire life, and even if he or she lives for the duration of a lifetime of Brahma, and uses all that time to understand, trying to understand the material nature, he won't arrive at any certain conclusive understanding. And we can see the material scientists, Srila Prabhupada was very bold in challenging them, telling them to their face that they don't understand anything, don't have a clue. And he was right. The more we read about modern scientific discoveries, at least from those rare, maybe I shouldn't say that, rare, honest scientists who admit that they don't understand anything. Like Siddhaputta Prabhu was an honest scientist. Ravindra Sarup Prabhu, again, a scholar who came to join Srila Prabhupada at the peak of his career as a philosopher. He came to interview Srila Prabhupada as a religious scholar and ended up becoming a devotee. He walked out of Srila Prabhupada's room and he remembered how something changed immediately, instantaneously in Srila Prabhupada's presence. What changed, and he was reflecting on the change that was affected by Srila Prabhupada's presence. He didn't preach to him any scientific or scholarly philosophical principles. He just spoke with him as a normal human being, but when he walked out of Srila Prabhupada's room, all of a sudden he caught himself thinking, well, now I know that Krishna exists. Krishna is reality, and he is as much a reality as I am. That was his own words. And then the second realization that came to him was that I didn't do anything for that. That's significant, like Prabhupada says in the end of this purport, he says that one should change the mode of consciousness from material consciousness to Krishna consciousness. That's what preaching is all about. And Rindas Prabhupada understood the potency of association with pure devotees, or pure devotee, or the pure devotee, Srila Prabhupada, who by his consciousness could flip that switch for the entire world. Basically, whoever Srila Prabhupada met, even casually or in some public setting, or even like on board of an airplane, or just being seen by some people from a distance without even having a chance to interact with him. Just like Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we remember a shloka from Chaitanya Chandramrita. It is explained by Prabodhananda Saraswati Thakur. How does it go? Дриштах, сприштах, киртитах, сам светова, дураста, рапьянатова, дритова, примнах сарам датум, иша и каши, Chaitanya Naomi Devam Dialum. Prabodhananda Saraswati Thakur, in his ecstatic mood of glorifying Lord Chaitanya, he says, Lord Chaitanya grants the highest benediction, the highest achievement, unattainable by any processes in the Vedas, unattainable by millions of lifetimes spent in carrying out one's prescribed duties. Krishna Prema, Lord Chaitanya grants that easily to those who don't even want it. Drishta, those who see him from a distance. Sprishta, those who touch him occasionally, as we know the stories from Chaitanya Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, excuse me. And then the fisherman touched Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and became possessed by prema, like by ghost. The description in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Kirtita, someone who glorifies Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, even if he or she glorify him as a great spiritual leader, a great sannyasi or sadhu, a pure devotee, very few people in this world accept Lord Chaitanya as God. But Srila Prabhupada explained it's not required. Even if someone glorifies Lord Chaitanya for his impeccable behavior and his devotional mood that he manifested, for his being a spiritual reformer, his being an ideal character, even that is enough to infect a person with Krishna Prema. Durastvara Pyanatu Vadritova, if somebody worships Lord Chaitanya on the altar, every morning at Mangalarati we see, and also now, some fortunate souls worshiping Lord Chaitanya Nityananda on the altar, or bowing down to him from a distance, from a faraway place, all of them receive the same gift. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu invests his presence and his potency, you could say unlimited potency of granting Krishna Prema to others. In the mood of Srimati Radharani, Lord Krishna becomes obsessed by what? By her desire to bring everyone to Krishna for his service. That's the mood described in Chaitanya Charitamrita, 4th chapter, that the highest pleasure Srimati Radharani feels is by bringing others to Krishna. Even though her happiness makes Krishna baffled, he cannot understand the glories and the intensity and the depth and the purity of her love. The love of Srimati Radharani is marked by contradictions. It's very contradictory. There are 3 features of Srimati Radharani's love described in the 4th chapter of Chaitanya, the first Adi Lila of Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's ever expanding and it doesn't know its limit. It's all embracing. It's one feature, one contradictory feature. Another one is it's the highest, but still Srimati Radharani feels that she's the lowest and she learns from everyone else who serves Krishna. And the third pair of contradictions, the first is it's ever expanding and increasing, but she feels she doesn't have it. The second is it's the highest, but she feels she doesn't have any love at all. And the third one is that it's very pure, pristine and clean, but it's also crooked. And what's the word that Prabhupada used? I don't remember. It's kind of crooked and not linear. Like that. So, but she wants to give that opportunity to serve Krishna to everyone else. And whenever she brings a fortunate soul to Krishna's lotus feet, it introduces him to service, she feels 10 million times more happiness than when she serves Krishna herself. How does it work mathematically? I don't know. And no one knows, not even Krishna. But when he assumes the mood of Srimati Radharani, he becomes eager to give Krishna to everyone through Sankirtana. That's how his internal and external purposes of appearing combine, they merge in Sankirtana. It's both internal and external at the same time. And then she sends devotees from the spiritual world here to do her bidding, do her service, and bring those who are suffering, like it is described in this verse, in Krishna's separation, back to him. It is described in Brihad Bhagavatamrita when Sarupa, formerly known as, also known as Gopakumar, when he came to the spiritual world first, and Krishna greeted him and singled him out, and he took him by his hand and wouldn't let him go. One whole day he would just hold the hand of Sarupa, and he would feed him with his own hand. He would introduce him to all of his friends and his parents, and that. And then he took him to the pasturing grounds for his intimate pastimes in the forest of Vrindavan. But then Sarupa explains that one day Srimati Radharani approached him and told him, could you just go back to the material world and bring one fortunate Brahmana from the city of Mathura who really wants to serve Krishna? That's my request. And Sanatana Goswami describes that even though separation from Krishna was intolerable for Gopakumar and for Krishna, both feel separation and both feel it's intolerable. But that request by Srimati Radharani immediately inspired Gopakumar Sarupa to go to the spirit, to the material world, and he says, I didn't feel the least distressed or upset or pained by that, you could say, forced separation. I went because that was the highest service, even higher than being with Krishna himself, personally. So Srila Prabhupada, as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's direct representative, his Senapati Bhakta, such devotees sometimes are called in Chaitanya Charitamrita as not Shakti-Vesha avatars. Shakti-Vesha avatar is an understatement. It's not, you could say, empowered enough. It's Bhagavata-Vesha. Those devotees who carry not just the potency of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Lord, but he himself in their hearts. And they are also given, along with Lord Chaitanya, they are given the right, the jurisdiction to give him whoever they want. That's why Prabhupada explains that it's more important to serve pure devotees of Krishna than Krishna himself, because they have that additional freedom. They have the freedom to violate our reluctance to serve Krishna. And they have given that potency to shake us out of our forgetfulness of Krishna in attentiveness. And the verse explains, I was going to get back to the scientists. I knew I drifted away from them. I was going to speak about Sadaputa Prabhu, but I went to Arinda Sarup Prabhu. I went to how he was changed by the Prabhupada's presence, and I went on to explain how Srila Prabhupada was able to change everyone's consciousness just by being present, because he is a Bhagavata Vesha, you could say. Or at least all the symptoms match. Whoever was, again, I wasn't in the presence of Srila Prabhupada, of course, unless it happened in my last lifetime. I don't know. I was born in 1972, so Prabhupada came to Russia in 1971, so I did miss him by 1 year and a few thousand kilometers. But again, that process of reflection of Prabhupada's presence through the hearts of his pure devotees, his followers, doesn't leave us wanting, doesn't feel us lacking anything in terms of his presence in our lives, right? So Sadaputa Prabhu, when Arinda Prabhu changed, and he came back, and Prabhupada then gave him a mission. To him, a philosopher, Prabhupada told him, your mission is to prove that Darwin is wrong, the theory of Darwin is wrong. And he had nothing to do with biology or genetics or anything of that kind. He was a philosopher, right? So he was baffled, or he was completely bewildered by that assignment. And he consulted his friend, a devotee, Sadaputa Prabhu, who was a mathematician, and he came and joined. He was PhD in mathematics and statistical mathematics of that, of all different fields. And he came and joined the new Vrindavan, and devotees couldn't figure out how to engage him. And with his mathematical background, so they thought maybe we should make him a treasurer, because apparently he can count as a PhD in mathematics. But soon they discovered that being able to count was not enough, because for the treasurer the most important skill is what to say no to people who come to ask for money. And he didn't have that skill. So he was so relieved of his treasurer, the position as a treasurer. So Harindas Prabhu came and confided in him, saying, I don't know what to do with this request by Prabhupada to prove Darwin wrong. And so the Buddha said, oh, that's easy. We mathematicians, we know he's wrong. It's impossible. That theory of evolution is completely impossible. All of us, all the scientists know that. We just don't tell the biologists because we don't want to upset them. Otherwise, we know it's wrong. So those honest scientists, they know that the material nature is completely inexplicable, unintelligible. Whichever direction you take, going up into the space and the cosmos, and studying stars and galaxies and clusters of galaxies, and then you end up being completely lost and bewildered. On the opposite direction, you go into the micro world and study atoms and protons and electrons and then quarks and string theory, and you end up with nothing. All you have to do is admit you don't understand, don't have a clue how this material world works. So the Bhagavatam doesn't waste time on that. What Bhagavatam does, the chapter is called Fundamental Principles of Material Nature. Bhagavatam gives us enough knowledge of the material nature to disillusion us. Krishna Kirtan Prabhu, I've been trying to keep abreast of the lecturers' realizations by watching lectures in Krishna Kirtan Prabhu. I listened to the class by Krishna Rupa Devi recently and a few more. And there was a topic of discussion, one of the topics of discussion was whether we need Sankhya philosophy to actually develop pure Krishna consciousness. I know there was a sort of discussion, maybe controversy, some devotees have different opinions whether it's needed or not, but we can safely say that in the proportion, in the ratio that Bhagavatam presents it, it's very favorable for devotional service. Why? Because it's spoken by Lord Kapila Deva and commented on by Srila Prabhupada. And besides their words being themselves potent with spiritual energy, whatever a pure devotee speaks is Krishna Kathai by definition. Whatever the Bhagavatam says, even some, you could see even unsavory description of the Bhagavatam, some of the descriptions you really feel a little bit embarrassed reading even when you're by yourself. And some of them may appear to be boring, some of them may appear to be too technical, and some of them are just lists of names. In the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, for instance, 11th, it's in the 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a long list of names. Pages after pages of just names of kings and queens who no one knows about. And why do we have to read the names? They're not names of Krishna, they're names of some, and some of them are quite materialistic as well. So why do we read all that? Because it's spoken by Shukadeva Goswami, whatever a pure devotee speaks becomes infused with Krishna's presence. Krishna Rupa Devi in her class said that her favorite verse was the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And the purport by Srila Prabhupada in that verse, the verse spoken by Prithu Maharaj says that Yaduttama Shloka, Mahamukha Chito, when a pure devotee speaks, then it's very poetic and very beautiful description. And whenever he or she speaks, their sound vibration carries the saffron particles of mercy from their mouths, and those saffron particles, speaking of biology and botanics and hay fever, the saffron particles of pollen. I always get allergy when I come to New Govardhan because I'm allergic to pollen, but that pollen is not allergy causing, not allergenic. What it does, it enters the heart through the ears and then sprouts, germinates there into Bhakti Lata. And Prabhupada explains in his purport then that it doesn't really matter what a pure devotee speaks. His voice itself is enough to make Krishna present in our hearts. Sometimes Prabhupada would say, he wouldn't preach to his disciples, but sometimes he would chat with them, what you call it small talk, about some current affairs, weather, or sometimes in his morning walks, I was told by devotees who accompanied him, he would greet people by good morning, which is surprising. It's a completely mundane greeting, and Prabhupada himself kind of wryly said that good morning means nothing terrible has happened yet. That's what people mean by good morning. If you say that early enough in the day, not allowing anything terrible to happen, that's good morning, good enough, right? So why would Prabhupada greet people in the West by good morning? And then he explained to one of his disciples who said, Prabhupada, why don't you say Hare Krishna? Because Hare Krishna, if you say once Hare Krishna to a person, then he becomes blessed. Prabhupada says, he replied that if people think well about devotees, for them it's even more beneficial. So he would say certain things. Sometimes he would just make sounds, indistinct sounds like recently recalling a story by Devamrita Maharaj. Maybe Maharaj, because Maharaj came here many times and he visits quite often, maybe he narrated the story in one of his classes, but when he was sitting in a cubicle in the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust working on indexing Srila Prabhupada's Chaitanya Charitamrita during that famous marathon, and Rameshwara Maharaj then was taking Prabhupada around to show how busily devotees are working on his books to make his demand fulfilled in 2 months, 17 volumes. So they came to the office where Devamrita Prabhu was sitting and working, and he introduced Devamrita. This is Devamrita Das, he's working on your index. And Prabhupada nodded in approval and said, that's it. That's the only direct instruction, whatever direct words spoken by, not even words, not even a syllable, just an indistinct sound, but that sound, again, Devamrita Maharaj reflects, is the most important thing he has ever heard in his life, like that. So when reading about these fundamental principles of material nature, it's important to understand that whatever is spoken by Shukadeva Goswami or Parikshit Maharaj, or whoever narrates Srimad Bhagavatam, is already infused by Krishna's presence. It's Krishna's, a part of Krishna's body. There was a joke, maybe I shouldn't say that, it's a politically incorrect joke. I heard it from Niranjana Maharaj, so I hope it's infused with his blessings, but he said in a class once that how do you know a politician is lying? How do you know a politician, not in Australia, in some other countries, how do you know a politician is lying? His lips are moving, that's how. So how do you know a pure devotee is speaking Krishna Katha? The same answer. He speaks nothing but Krishna Katha and speaks about nothing but rasa. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in his article, his poem, Prakrita Rasa Shatadushani, in many shlokas, about 70 plus, maybe even more than that. In one of them he says, a pure devotee never says anything about, never speaks about anything except rasa. Whatever he says is rasa by definition. So even when Srila Prabhupada delves into these technicalities or he repeats the same points over and over again, these words, when we read or hear them, they have the potency of waking us up to have pure consciousness, just like an alarm clock. An alarm clock, that ring tone of the alarm clock, doesn't matter what the ring tone is. It should be loud enough. That's what it is. It wouldn't put any, white noise as an alarm, as a ringtone for an alarm clock, because it lulls you into sleep again. Something shrill, something penetrating, something very, very loud. And that's what a pure devotee does when he speaks or writes his commentaries. So in this verse, the lamentable condition of a living entity is described. He is originally a pure devotee of Krishna. He has his own glories in Bhagavatam, throughout the Bhagavatam. The final attainment of one's spiritual pursuit is described sometimes as svamahimne. Svamahimne means that the living entity goes back to his original position, to literally his own glory. But what makes him or robs him of his actual glory, his actual position, is his forgetfulness of that position. Srila Prabhupada, oftentimes, again, Srila Prabhupada was extremely consistent. He would speak over and over again about a certain topic without changing his presentation. In the beginning of his preaching in the West, at the end, you could see Srila Prabhupada's video of him dictating his last commentaries on Srimad Bhagavatam. Yadubara Prabhu filmed that for us in the movie, in the documentary, The Last Lesson, or the final lesson, right, it's called. And you could see Prabhupada motionless, hardly moving his lips, and the microphone is pressed, almost pressed against his mouth. And then he speaks, dictates the last words on his Srimad Bhagavatam. The same message. Whatever he spoke, even before he came to to the West, when he wrote articles for the self-published Back to God magazine, again, he gave the same message. We are originally servants of Krishna, we were in Krishna in the spiritual world, and because of our misfortune, misuse of our free will, we came to this world and forgot our original consciousness. And all we need to do is to go back to the spiritual world, again being reminded by pure devotees about that original position. Now, in this verse, and now probably that's the last thing I'll say because time is short and I would like to leave some time for comments or corrections or questions, if there are any questions to be discussed. Even though I had a lot of points to cover, but I won't even start today. But those literalists who really prefer to stick to the literal meaning of verses in Srimad Bhagavatam would be quick to point out that the word forgetfulness is not present in the Sanskrit. What is present is Ivam parabhidhyanina. Parabhidhyanina literally means one who is absorbed, abhidhyanina, in para, in something else. Where is forgetfulness? Why does Srila Prabhupada thrust that forgetfulness thing about whatever he speaks about, whenever he speaks about living entities? Is Prabhupada just trying to force us to accept his point of view? No, because Srila Prabhupada is just looking deeper into what is actually happening to the living entities. What happens is described in the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam by Sanat Kumar in his instructions to Prithu Maharaj. He gives a very nice example. Like here we have that donut-shaped lake. And when I came this time, I could see that it was almost overgrown by whatever the plants on the shore. And sometimes when it's unattended, such a lake can be completely drained by canes and other vegetation on its shores. So the example he gives in the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, that of a lake which is drained and dried by canes that suck up all its water. In the same way, he says, the original consciousness of the living entity is drained, is absorbed by his misidentifications with the body, with the mind, with the relations that we surround ourselves in the material world. And it's very difficult to make it go back to its, to revert the process, to make it clean and clear again. What it takes, there is no process from what I know to extract that water from the canes and put it back into the lake. It's too late. The water is gone. It's turned into stalks, into flowers, into leaves. The only thing that could help is what? What could help to make that rain. A lot of rain, not just a drizzle, a lot of rain. Samsara davana lidhaloka tranaya karanya ganaganatam. That's what a pure devotee, such as Srila Prabhupada and those he empowers, does with us. It fills us up with the original pure Krishna consciousness, just like streams of rain fill up that drained lake that turned into swamp back and restores it to its pure condition. So when Srila Prabhupada says paradhyayana should be translated as forgetfulness, he is just looking deeper. It is explained elsewhere in the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. It uses the same word parabhidhyayana, and in that verse it's qualified by smriti, smriti vibramsha, something like that, which means by absorbing oneself into something that we are not. And Prabhupada again gave a wonderful example, definition of Maya. One of Prabhupada's very impressive skills, his mystic ability, was to give precise definitions to things that clear things up immediately. One of the definitions of Maya he gives, Maya is working for something that you are not. That's the definition of Maya. Elsewhere he gives a definition of kama, lust. Lust is, do you want to hear that, the definition? Lust is desires that cannot be fulfilled. How do you like that? What do you call them? You call them, what's the word I'm looking for? The person who likes to, I forget the term. They use for people who like to disappoint, to disillusion. I forget, there is a certain term for those people, but that's how Prabhupada disillusions us by explaining that Maya is working for something that you're not, that karma, desires, lusty desires are, by definition, they cannot be fulfilled, right? So Prabhupada explains that by being absorbed in something that we are not, we, by definition, by necessity, forget those who we are. There's a psychological phenomenon, it's called inattentional blindness. Have you heard of that? Inattentional blindness. Actually, I had a personal experience of that inattentional blindness this morning as I was reading for this class. Inattentional blindness is a phenomenon when people are absorbed in something. There was a very funny experiment staged. People were asked to watch two groups of people playing basketball. And they were passing basketball to each other. One of the groups was dressed in black t-shirts, another one was dressed in white t-shirts, and they had the basketball. And they were passing it to each other. And the people who were studied, the guinea pigs of that experiment, they were asked to count the number of passes between the two groups of that basketball. And once in a while, in that video, there was a man dressed in a gorilla suit. And he would just jump out of nowhere and wave a hand and thump his chest and would go back. And they asked, it was very visible, gorilla, who would you expect a gorilla in a basketball match? And then the people who were being studied, they were asked, did you notice the gorilla? 50% of people didn't notice because they were absorbed in watching the basketball. That's called inattentional blindness. So as I was reading for the verse, Parabhidhyayana, being absorbed in looking up the meaning of this word Parabhidhyayana, I received it is a bell in Mukunda Maharaj's quarters. He rang the bell. And I came running to his room. It was 5:40 in the morning. I said, yes, Guru Maharaj. And he said, what about my tea? It was supposed to be served at 5:30. I was absorbed in reading for the class and completely forgot my service. Right? So that's what happens. If we get absorbed in something we are not, we by definition, by necessity, forget about who we are. So the only thing that Prabhupada tells us to do to revert that process, it's fortunately reversible, is to hear from the mouths of those devotees who remember who they are. And who remember who they are and who take pleasure in reminding us Smarantak Smarayantascha Midhau Gauga Haram Harim Bhaktya Sanjataya Bhaktya Vibhratat Pulakantanum in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. It is explained that devotees have to get together for that reason only. Everyone else in this world can remind us of so many other things. The weather, political trends, and financial markets, and health, and whatever else. But only the devotees of Srila Prabhupada, devotees of this Krishna consciousness movement, have that ability, have the assignment, and have that inclination to remind us of Krishna, just like Krishna Kirtan Prabhu. Sorry, you are sitting right in front of me, so I'm kind of absorbed in the devotees who I see. And the Krishna Kirtan Prabhu, whenever I speak with him, and I'm sure all of you have the same experience, whenever you speak with him about whatever subject, whatever subject, it invariably goes to Krishna. He has a way to connect Krishna with everything. I guess there is a timer there, right? Set in the microphone. The time is up. All right, Hare Krishna. Thank you. I'm through my third microphone in the class. Right. They have that way to connect everything because Krishna is connected with everything. It was Krishna Rupa Devi who, in her class, quoted, she narrated that story about how she was sitting in Prabhupada's room and Prabhupada, he cupped his hand. Somebody asked him if Krishna, pure devotee sees Krishna everywhere. He cupped his hand and he said, as if he was holding a drop of water in the hand, and he said, a pure devotee, who remembers what she said? Who were there present in your class? Thomas?
All of his associates as well as the 900,000 cows.
Yeah, he could see in that any drop of water, Krishna's associates, and all of his cows, 100,000 cows, in one drop, because Krishna is present there. And all we need to do to develop that vision is to hear from the mouths of pure devotees. And that's what flips the switch for us, changes from material consciousness to Krishna consciousness. And that's why Prabhupada instituted Srimad Bhagavatam classes, so we could flip the switch every single day, because unfortunately for us, throughout the day, especially at night, what happens, somehow it just flips back to material consciousness, and Prabhupada helps us to restore ourselves to Krishna consciousness every single morning at Mangalarati, in Bhagavatam class, and throughout the day, and help others in doing so. Thank you very much for your attention. I received a very short notice, as I said in the beginning, to cover for Vishnu Jan Prabhu, who was supposed to give a class today, this morning, and I didn't have too much time to think about the verse. So whatever I have said has pleased you was because of the presence of all of you, and especially Prabhupada's disciples present here, Alarnath Prabhu, Vasasheshta Prabhu, Chamari Devi, and whatever was displeasing is of my own making. Any corrections or questions? Do we have time for questions? Because it's already 8:30, and I think all of you are hungry. Yes. Krishna Kirtan Prabhu, do we have time for questions?
For you, yes.
But not for answers, right? Ask questions. Yes. Yes, Noah.
Can you please repeat the 3 characteristics of
Srimad
Radharani's love?
It's in the 4th chapter of Adi Lila of Chaitanya Charitamrita. There are 3 mutually contradictory qualities. From what I remember, because I read it a few months ago, I may have not recalled it properly, but one of them, that Srimati Radharani's love was ever expanding, but she doesn't feel it. Are you checking?
No.
Because I will be happy to be corrected.
No.
But she doesn't feel she has any. It's supreme, but she herself feels herself very humble. And then she's pure, but it's also kind of, the word Prabhupada is used is perverted and crooked. Something like that. These are 3 contradictory pairs of qualities of Srimati Radharani's love. There is a less known bhajan written by Srila Prabhupada on board of the Jaladuta ship. One of them is Markini Bhagavata Dharma, and another one is a more private prayer. You could say it's called Prayer to the Lotus Feet of Krishna, and the refrain of that verse of that bhajan says, Krishna Tabapuni Habibai. I don't remember Bengali, but in that refrain Prabhupada says, Dear Krishna, Bhai, he refers to him as brother. And elsewhere in that bhajan he says, You are my eternal associate. Not the other way around. He says, You are my eternal associate. If you allow me to fulfill the order of my spiritual master, if you allow me to spread Krishna consciousness, Srimati Radharani will be very pleased with you. That's how he leverages on Krishna. That's his words. Somehow it's not properly translated in our bhajans, in our songbooks. But that's what Prabhupada says. If you do that, if you allow me to fulfill the mission that was given to me by my spiritual master, Srimati Radhani will be very pleased with you. Now take your pick. Okay, I have to stop here or have some more questions? Or Chamari, do you have any corrections? I wanted to thank you very much, Chamari Devi, for your very generous video interview, short video about that Murti of Srila Prabhupada you recorded, and we made your interview into a kind of short video on about the project, and that part where he says, that's you who are inspiring us. It's so inspiring to us to feel that we are managing to inspire you.
It's a gift of Srila Prabhupada devotees. For myself, I can speak, but also speaking to my god brothers and other god sisters, it was so deeply, deeply appreciated and inspiring. So, just recently, one of my god brothers, Van Gopal, who passed 7 years ago, his widow just received a Prabhupada Murti, the Kunja, and she was in tears of appreciation, absolutely in tears of appreciation. And that's actually how we all felt when we gave it. So I sincerely thank yourself who headed this project, the team that you had that supported and did everything. It was so deeply appreciated.
Well, thank you so very much. Thank you. There's someone here who masterminded that surprise gift to Mataji Nikunja Seva. He's sitting here, I won't mention his name. But somehow by Krishna's arrangement we had a sleeve with his name printed.
Yes.
Even though we knew that he had left, but somehow we had this Krishna's arrangement. It was there printed, his name was printed.
Thank you, Krishna, for your time. For her, it's made, she's always a very inspiring and inspired devotee, but it's given her another depth of her attachment to Prabhupada devotees and community.
Yeah, it's our attempt to give back to you what we have received from you in the form of that Murti. Like offering Ganges to get water to the Ganges. Kind of. Yes, no.
Hare Krishna, class. So you mentioned how we can change our consciousness from material consciousness to Krishna consciousness by focusing our attention on the words of a pure devotee or hearing Krishna guitar. Does this also apply if like our mind is like focused on prasadam, because that's like Krishna himself and Krishna is absolute. Is this still like similar kind of thing, or is that just like sense gratification?
You're asking if we have to pay attention to other parts of our devotion, so like taking prasadam?
Yeah, other parts, like all of it, like, and particularly prasadam, because, the one that's considered like, if you're thinking of prasadam or you're thinking about gratifying senses, but if it's non-different from Krishna, does that still help us to be Krishna conscious because we're thinking of Krishna in the form of the prasadam?
Well, I would probably best answer this question by quoting Prabhupada's own words once he was asked why he was always blissful in Krishna consciousness. And the way Prabhupada answered is very instructive for us. He could have said, because I'm a pure devotee, I'm like you. Or he could say, because I'm an eternal servant, whatever. But he said, because I pay attention to every single small detail of devotional service, that's why. That was his answer. So yes, even if we're inattentive in chanting, or if we're not deliberately inattentive, because deliberate inattention is offensive. Whereas if it's just habitual inattention, Krishna can overlook that. Prabhupada explains in the initial stages of devotional service, offenses are inevitable. But if we catch ourselves being inattentive and try to be attentive, Krishna takes that as as proof of our being serious and sincere. And he gradually helps us overcome that inattentiveness, which is the root cause of all offenses. Otherwise, yes, inattention is basically an offense, because by inattention you show, it's like non-verbal communication that I don't care for you. I have things more important than you in my life. And this is explained by Sanat Kumar in the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, again in the same instructions to Prithu Maharaj. He says, there is no stronger obstacle in devotional service than what? Take a guess.
Offenses?
No. Something very important. He says, then what? Offenses or bad association or this and that. He says, then a thought that there are things more pleasurable, more important than devotional service. That thought is the most difficult obstacle to overcome. So when we catch ourselves being inattentive and revert back to attentiveness, that's the clearing stage or namabas stage of chanting, or namabas, or you could say the clearing stage in all our services. Beginning with the service that's why it's so important to deal with the spiritual master, because he'll remind us, just like Mukunda Maharaj reminded me this morning, what about my tea? So when we associate with devotees and give them the jurisdiction in our lives to correct us, then we'll have a hope, and they'll return us back to our attentive state. Prabhupada would always be very attentive while taking prasadam. I was told by Shutakirti Prabhu in his remembrances, he says Prabhupada in Melbourne, he would sit facing the wall and he would very meditatively take prasadam without talking to anyone, without saying a word. And however long it would take, maybe 40 minutes, 45 minutes, he was very absorbed in taking prasadam. And then he would ask for a toothpick. Why? That's the last thing I was going to say. Because he didn't want to waste a single morsel of prasadam. He would use a toothpick, and he said in South Africa we had Shutakirti Prabhu there, and in his classes he mentioned Prabhupada wanted to make sure that every single piece of prasadam was honored, even the ones stuck between the teeth. That attentive Srila Prabhupada was. Thank you so much. I overused your time and favorable disposition. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam Grantha Raja ki jai, Samagata Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaura Premananda.